Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Let's have a little story time with Quincy. See, this week, the Browns played Shedeur Sanders after Dylan Gabriel went out with a concussion. Shedeur got in there and unfortunately did not look great, right? Like, I think there's a lot of ways you could spin it. I know there are going to be some people that try to tell you that there was a great performance actually by Shedeur, but I don't see a world where we're making 4 of 16 for 47 yards, 2.9 on average, 2 sacks, and a 13 rating, a good performance. I've not heard that be the case for very many quarterbacks, but he went 4 of 16. He had a bad game. Shedeur himself has admitted that he has had a bad game. And in the aftermath of this performance, there has been a lot of conversation about why he had a bad game. The main theory that you're hearing right now is that Shedeur played poorly because he did not have a ton of first-team reps under his belt. Now, the way people are wording this is a little bit strange to me because people are saying Shedeur didn't get any reps whatsoever before the start of the season. And yeah, he didn't get first-team reps, but Shedeur certainly got reps in the offense and reps with people who played on Sunday. He got reps with Isaiah Bond in training camp. He got reps with Gage Larvidan in training camp. Hell, he played with KT Leviston at some point during the practice sessions because KT Leviston is like a second, third string guy. So it's not like he had no preparation coming into this game, but he didn't have first-team reps. Now, the first question when you hear that is, well, before I get upset, if you're a reasonable person, before I get upset, is this a normal thing for a backup quarterback not to get first-team reps throughout the season? And there were a couple of NFL players who are willing to elaborate on this conversation. Saw this tweet from Kurt Warner, who we would all agree is an experienced former NFL quarterback who has a little bit of authority in this manner. And he was asked about, hey, is it strange that Shedeur hasn't gotten first team reps? Here's what Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner had to say. He said, everywhere I was, the backup, because Kurt Warner's been the backup, rarely got number one reps. Wanted all the reps when I was number one. And if backup got any, it was a couple at the end of different periods. So Kurt Warner is unique. He's speaking of this as a Hall of Fame quarterback who has been a no doubt starter in his NFL career. And he's also speaking from the perspective of a guy who was at the bottom of the roster trying to make it. Knows what he's talking about in this matter. He says it's not normal, right? Braden Fedioko, who I've had on this show, former NFL player, says, for those of you who have never been a part of an organization, you need to understand how this shit works. You don't just give all your QB reps in practice. Your starter takes the starter reps. Your backup runs the scout team. And that's why Tom Brady harps on mental reps. Your starter always takes the starter reps, especially at quarterback. Now, there are some rare exceptions, right? If you're like the New York Giants and you draft a quarterback in the first round that you know is eventually going to play, and you have a veteran starter like Russell Wilson, who's there to kind of be a placeholder, you might give your first round pick some reps throughout the year in the first team because you know that the season's really about that guy. But outside of drafting a guy in the first round, it's really unusual for a backup to get first team reps is what the consensus seems to be from people who have played in the NFL. So yeah, Shedeur didn't get first team reps, but it seems like that's kind of part of the job description for a backup quarterback is to prepare yourself without those first team reps. Now, is that a tough job for a backup quarterback to have? Yes. Should the Cleveland Browns be kind of criticized for their consistent willingness to put guys at the backup position who don't have enough NFL experience to be able to learn from mental reps? I certainly think so. But is it strange that Shedeur didn't get first team reps before he played when he's the backup quarterback? Absolutely not. It's not strange at all. It's actually the most normal thing a NFL team could do. And when I go down my timeline, by the way, I'm seeing all kind of like tweets that are mad at stuff that have perfectly normal explanation. I saw this tweet, right? What's going on right now? Somebody in the front office needs to be investigated. It's in reaction to a protection look that the Browns have. Now, the protection look they have in there is, it looks like what, 3-jet? Where 3-jet to the right, and then they have a running back in there to pick up, and I think they pick up Kyle Hamilton, and then on a twist, they have an end coming around through the A gap. And they're looking at this and they're circling, hey, why are 3 guys on this side blocking 1 guy and 2 guys blocking 3 people here, which is a pretty bad protection snafu. And that is a brilliant thing to point out. The problem with that is the context in which it's pointed out, which is to say, oh, it's the Browns front office that's setting that protection, or the Browns coaching staff that's setting that protection. Because in the NFL, you know who's responsible for setting protections? It's the quarterback. The quarterback's responsible for setting protections. So unless Shedeur Sanders is engaged in a conspiracy against himself and trying to execute a conspiracy against himself, then I don't think this is evidence of a conspiracy. I think this is just a bad rep from Shedeur Sanders when it comes to setting a protection, which happens for a rookie quarterback. It's not that big of a deal. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that there would be story time in it, right? Because all this hoopla about first team reps and sabotage, it reminds me of 2023. Now, walk back down memory lane if you can, but in 2023, the Browns had a rookie quarterback who was drafted in the 5th round named Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Now, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was really, really good in the preseason in his rookie year, like very good, fun. He was the funnest thing in the preseason for the Browns. And he had been, like, I think Pro Football Focus's highest graded rookie quarterback of the year. And people were really hyping him up, saying that, hey, I think the Browns might have found a Brock Purdy in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, there was a lot of excitement about Dorian Thompson-Robinson at the time of 2023. Now, few games into the 2023 season, Deshaun Watson, who at that point hadn't really earned that much love from the fan base, had a couple of good games, but had been looking really shaky. Some of the fan base was hoping that Dorian Thompson-Robinson could get in there at some point, take the job from Deshaun Watson and be, and I remember these quotes, this team's version of Jalen Hurts. So that's what they were hoping for, right? And that was in the comparison between him and Carson Wentz money-wise. And it was a fair thing to hope for at the time. And then Dorian Thompson-Robinson got to play. Now, the circumstances in which Dorian got to play were a little bit shaky, right? The Browns were expecting Deshaun to start all the way up until Saturday, and then Saturday hit, and Deshaun is saying he might not be able to play. And then we get to Sunday, it's a game time decision. Deshaun's not the starter. Boom, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is the starter. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson went out there and looked god awful. He put up a horrific stat line and had a bad game. I'll read the numbers to be exact here because I do want to be thorough with this story. He played against the Baltimore Ravens. The Browns lost that game 3-28. And he went 19 of 36, 52.8 completion percentage, 121 yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions with 3.4 yards per attempt. I think we can all agree that's not a good day. Now, a lot of people in the aftermath of that said to themselves, hey, Dorian Thompson-Robinson can't be that bad. He's not as bad as that game indicates. And you know what? He didn't get any reps. He didn't get any of the practice reps. And if he got the practice reps, he would have looked way better. That was the conversation we were having about Dorian Thompson-Robinson at the time. Now, fast forward to week 10, where the Browns played the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in that game versus the Steelers, that the Browns did win and Dorian had a couple of nice throws in, he largely looked the same even after getting those first team reps. 24 of 43, 55.8% completion percentage, so a slight uptick there. 165 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, 3.8 yards per attempt. Now, if we go and look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson's career numbers, those numbers are strikingly similar to the numbers that he debuted with, right? Talking about a 52.6% career completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 10 interceptions, and a yards per attempt number of 3.8. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that Shedeur Sanders is Dorian Thompson-Robinson. That would be ridiculous, right? Even in the one outing that Shedeur had, he looked better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson has his entire career. Certainly, Shedeur Sanders is better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Not my point. I'm not saying they're the same player. What I am saying is that we learned in 2023 that maybe getting those first team reps isn't going to make the difference we thought it would make. Maybe it's hard to blame every bad play a player has, every bad habit a player had in the game, every missed throw on not having first team reps. And maybe there's just a lot more to clean up there than what you thought. That's what I learned from the Dorian Thompson-Robinson thing. Because you know who was one of those people screaming about the practice reps after Dorian Thompson-Robinson failed in his first game? It was me. I was upset about those practice reps. I yelled about those practice reps until he finally flamed out by the end of the 2023 season. See, we can make this about the practice reps, and then we could push all kind of dialogue about Shedeur until he gets to practice with the reps. But the reality is, it's not going to drastically change how you look as a quarterback. It might affect some things along the margins, but it's not going to completely change what you look like at this point of your development. And I think the reality with Shedeur has been and has always been that he was a kind of prospect that was going to take longer to develop than I think most people anticipated. Why do I think that? I'll explain that after I get to my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. If you look at the quarterbacks who come out and they're immediately able to get some level of success versus the quarterbacks who take a little bit longer, Shedeur fits the profile of guys who take a little bit longer, right? The guys who have immediate success, they have like a specific talent, a natural gift. We're talking about like arm talent, athletic ability that's so far above his peers that it allows him to have a little bit of a floor before he's ready to, have a floor as just a quarterback, right? Like Josh Allen was terrible as a passer to start his career, but his athletic ability gave him a floor. The same thing could be said to a lesser extent with Lamar Jackson, who was better as a passer than Josh, but still very raw as a passer early in his career. Jalen Hurts had a similar floor because of his athletic ability. Shedeur is not that kind of athlete. He's not that kind of talent at the quarterback position. He is somebody I do think can eventually maybe push for a starting job in the NFL, maybe even be better than that. I think his high end for him as a prospect is somewhere along the line of like pre-concussion Tua. And I think his most likely scenario is Teddy Bridgewater, right? Like somebody who's kind of on the fringes of being a starter for most of their career. And I think he can get to that outcome, but I think it's going to take a couple of years for him to get to that outcome because he's going to need a lot of time in the NFL. He's going to need more and more, mental reps. He's going to need more and more experiences of having different kind of coverages explained to him so he can be able to win the way he needs to, because what Shedeur needs to be successful is he needs to be a pocket passer. And to win in the NFL as a pocket passer is to live through a lot of trial and error, right? Like that's the only real way that you get better at it. And that's going to take a lot of time. And that's why I've always felt like he's one of those prospects that people want to be good right away, but he's probably going to take a little bit of time, because winning that way in the NFL just takes a long time to learn. Like whenever we talk about all these quarterbacks from like the 2000s who took forever to develop, it's usually because most of those quarterbacks were dedicated to like this pocket style of play. But you look at like the guys who were athletic in that era, they were able to be good much earlier, right? Because their athletic ability gave them a floor that you just can't have as a pocket passer. And the reality is, with the Browns situation right now, do they have the time to wait the amount of time that's necessary for Shedeur to maybe hit to where he's going to be as a starting quarterback, maybe, and benefit from it? Probably not. I think some other teams probably going to benefit from the work that the Browns are putting in right now. And I think Shedeur might play his best football somewhere else. And I think that's going to be what's best for everybody involved. The Browns need to move on to a different conversation at quarterback after the Deshaun Watson era. And it'd probably be best for Shedeur to just get away from everything that's been this rookie season for him. So, it's kind of what I see it as, right? But I've never really thought that Shedeur was going to walk in day one and reach his potential. I never thought that he was that kind of quarterback. So I'm not going to be mad at him for him stepping in and kind of looking how I expected him to look as the kind of rookie quarterback that he is. And to me, it's more evidence of why he wasn't being rushed to be the starter in the first place. I asked this question to Brad Ward and other people when we talk about the Shedeur thing. Do we want to see Shedeur because we're actually convinced he's going to be better, or do we want to see Shedeur because we're hoping that it'd be more entertaining? I think we all know the answer to that question, right? When we ask questions about how the Browns handled the management of practice reps, and I hear people say the Browns could have took away some of Dillon Gabriel's practice reps and given them to Shedeur, and that could have developed both guys at the same time. Are you saying that because you truly think that's the best way to develop both those players simultaneously? Or are you saying that because you really don't care if Dillon Gabriel gets developed or not, because you actually just want some development resources to go towards Shedeur? It just doesn't feel like we're asking these questions and being critical of these processes in favor of Shedeur from an honest, critical place. It feels like we're all doing this from the perspective of wanting to see Shedeur without admitting that that's why we're doing this. And that has led to us rushing this guy out on the field and putting him in a situation where he's a backup when maybe he shouldn't have been the backup. Now, hopefully next week he plays well versus the Raiders and he looks more like how we want him to look next week. But this week wasn't strong for him. He got to the game with a 6-point lead and ended up losing the game by 7. It's not great. Do I think if Dillon plays in that same game, did the Browns win? Probably not. We've seen Dillon have a 7-point lead at halftime and sit on it for an entire half until the Browns blow the lead defensively. Can't expect that Dillon would have been any better in that situation. But I think that's the moral of the story there. Are the first team reps important? Sure. But you know what else is more important than those first team reps? The monster that is the Cleveland Browns offense. And that's the real problem. But I think a lot of people are putting a lot on the first team reps. And what happens if he does get the first team reps this week and he looks better, but he doesn't look that different than how he looked in this game? I think the best thing about his performance in this game was what he's done in the 2-minute drill. But I've pointed this out. Every quarterback in this offense has looked better in the 2-minute drill. And I think that has more to do with how defenses play you than it has to do about the success of those quarterbacks. Because what happens in a 2-minute drill? That's the one time where if you're the Cleveland Browns, the defense isn't sitting in a box. They open up the field a little bit because they don't want to get beat quickly for a score in a situation where they think it's relatively easy to lock up a dub or to lock up a lead going into halftime. So Yes, there was more success there at the end of 2-minute drills, but I remember saying the same thing, that Dylan Gabriel looked better in the 2-minute drill, and that Joe Flacco looked better in the 2-minute drill. We go back. I remember saying Deshaun Watson's strongest stuff happened in the 2-minute drill. And I can even go back to Dorian Thompson-Robinson against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he had his best stuff happen in that 2-minute drill. So not saying that that's sugar water completely. I'm just saying that it's not uncommon for a quarterback who's struggling to find a little success in a 2-minute drill. And it doesn't necessarily mean that success is going to carry over. It just means that the defense decided to play them a little different and give them more space because they're worried about taking up more time than they are about really stopping you from completing passes at that point. All in all, I don't know what the aftermath of this debut is going to be. I imagine there's going to be a lot of nonsense on both sides of this argument, right? Like the Shedeur truthers will try to tell you this was a good game, actually, and that, he was the only quarterback of all time who's ever had to play without first-team reps in their life. And Shedeur actually triumphed in this moment. And I'm sure that there are just Shedeur haters who are going to try to close the door on his career and say that he sucks and that he needs to retire, whatever dumb bullshit that people are going to come up with. The reality is that Shedeur looked like a rookie in his first game, and we'll see what he looks like in his next start. I think every quarterback has been set up to look bad in this offense. It's not a conspiracy, it's just the reality of the Browns offense at this point. Like, again, we have done this for 2 years. Joe Flacco goes in there at the beginning of the season. He doesn't look good. Everybody's like, oh, let's get rid of Joe Flacco. Let's go to Dylan Gabriel. He's going to look better. It looks the same with Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel gets hurt. Shedeur comes in, and only one half of football has been played so far. So maybe it looks a lot different next week, but I find it hard to imagine it does. But what we've seen so far, Shedeur hasn't really broken that mold either, right? It's pretty much same exact shit we've been dealing at with this offense. Like it's literally the same old shit here, right? And that's not really a commentary on Shedeur more than it's a commentary on what this offense has done to every quarterback that's played in it. And I think we just need to acknowledge that at this point. Like, yeah, are the first team reps important? Sure, but he's still getting first team reps in this offense. And the reality is there simply aren't enough first team reps in the world to make this offense great, right? Like, it's not going to be reps that make this offense amazing. Joe Flacco had a ton of first team reps, looked bad in this offense. Dylan Gabriel had a ton of first team reps, looked bad in this offense. And Shedeur, if he gets a ton of first team reps, is it going to surprise me if it's a similar result? Not really. Like, it's not going to surprise me at all. I think, unfortunately, people have talked themselves into the Shedeur experience being something that it was always unrealistic to promise it would be, right? That it would just transform the offense and it'd be obvious, and that it'd be obvious that there's some kind of conspiracy that the Browns are playing him. We have gone through this multiple times during this offseason and during this season. Every time we see Shedeur Sanders play, it doesn't feel like there's a conspiracy that's necessary to keep him off the field. We'll see what happens this week. Shedeur is set to start as Dylan Gabriel is still in concussion protocol, but, concussion protocol is one of those things that could be very long or very short. So, we'll see. We've seen the Denzel Ward get concussion protocol and come back from it like a couple of days later. We've seen guys like Cedric Tillman be out like a month or two with concussion protocol. We'll see what happens with that concussion protocol, if Dylan Gabriel's able to get back fast or not. And maybe we get to get a full look here at Shedeur for the next couple of weeks while he's trying to come back from this concussion protocol. And maybe we end this month with some real stuff to talk about when it comes to the quarterbacks and what they've put out here. My guess is that we're just going to end up talking about how bad this offense is and how hard it is to be successful in this offense right now if you're a Cleveland Browns quarterback, because there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed that can only really be addressed during the offseason. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.